On the day the country celebrated Labor Day, I was alone in an old garage, signing my own resignation, with a cheap pen and grease-stained hands. Meanwhile, my son was laughing at his mother's house, like I was just a faded memory from the story I built with my own sweat. Years ago, I signed everything thinking it was love. I signed a power of attorney. I signed every paper without reading, and ended up signing my own downfall. But what they don't know is that scrap metal is still metal. And when the right fire heats it up, it doesn't break. It comes back strong enough to hold everything together again. If you've ever been tossed aside like a useless part, this story is for you. Follow my comeback, chapter by chapter. Stick around till the end, because this garage is about to make a lot of noise. The September sun was shining over the neighborhood, and the smell of grilled meat filled the air. Flags waved from porches, kids ran around with colorful balloons, and laughter echoed through the streets. But inside the old garage, there was only heavy silence. Sitting on a rusty iron chair, I watched the world through the window, a world that felt so far away. For me, this Labor Day was nothing more than a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. I wiped my grease-stained hand across my time-worn face, feeling the rough, tired skin. At 60, the weight of loneliness felt heavier than the engines I used to take apart with ease. The phone on the workbench sat silent, and the absence of a call from my son hurt more than my ex-wife's betrayal. I remembered when he used to hang around the shop, watching me with admiration. Now, all I had was the emptiness of a rejected invitation. Outside, fireworks cracked through the air, celebrating the national holiday. But for me, work had always been more than a job. It was who I was. My identity, my reason to exist. And even that had been taken. The company I built with sweat and sleepless nights now bore her name. My son was there, beside her, eating barbecue, laughing, living like I never existed. That festive scene only made the wound deeper. The garage, once a symbol of my dream, had turned into a prison. The cracked walls and rusted ceiling stood in sharp contrast to the days when every corner buzzed with running engines. The smell of burnt oil was the only thing left, reminding me that even in the wreckage, something remained. My love for machines. But the pain of being forgotten was a weight that threatened to crush me. I grabbed an old bottle of whiskey, took a bitter swig, and closed my eyes. The burn down my throat felt like the rage I'd been swallowing for years. Outside, the laughter of families sounded like mockery. Every laugh echoing through the street felt like a hammer to my chest. There was no one left to share this loneliness. I thought about how my son, once so close, had drifted away. First came the excuses. Dad, I'm busy. Dad can't do today. Then, the silence. Now, the cruel confirmation. He'd rather spend the holiday with his mother, in the mansion she took from me, than in the garage where it all began. The ingratitude cut like a blade. While the world celebrated the value of labor, I faced the irony of my own life. Everything I built was taken from me. With pens and papers I signed without reading. My ex-wife had been patient, calculated, each signature a step closer to her final move. Now, on the holiday that should have symbolized my struggle, I was just a defeated spectator. The memories came in waves. My son's eyes, lit with excitement as a child, watching engines roar under my hands. The pride in my wife's voice back when she used to say she believed in me. Now every memory felt like a setup, a well-staged play where I ended up the fool. The emptiness I felt was bigger than the whole damn garage. A single tear ran down my grease-stained face. I wiped it quickly, almost ashamed to cry. I'd always been made of steel, hard like the machines I fixed. But even metal wears down. Rust eats through what once seemed unbreakable. My heart, once armored, was now in ruins. As night fell, the fireworks still echoed in the distance. I took a deep breath and looked around the garage like I was searching for one last bit of comfort. I didn't know it yet, but this dusty, forgotten place was about to become the stage for my redemption. Labor Day 2025 wouldn't be remembered for abandonment, but as the day I began to reignite the flames of my revenge. With trembling hands, I pulled a crumpled piece of paper from the drawer and laid it on the oil-stained workbench. The scratch of my pen against the page felt almost ceremonial. Every word in that resignation letter carried the weight of a lifetime. It was an act of liberation, but also mourning, like I was burying the last part of me that still believed in fairness. As I wrote, flashes of my journey invaded my mind. I remembered the days I slept in this garage just to finish a job, braving the cold and heat without a single complaint. This company was born here, in the smell of grease and hot metal. Everything I ever achieved came from the sacrifice of these calloused hands. And now, the empire I built belonged to someone else. The anger grew as I recalled my ex-wife's tricks. She'd show up with documents saying, "It's just for the kids' health insurance." Always with that sweet tone. I was too busy with clients and engines to question anything. I signed everything. Years passed like that, each signature a nail in the coffin of my freedom. And now, like a damn fool, I realized I gave it all away willingly. The pain didn't stop at her. My son was part of it too. He used to run through this garage laughing, covered in grease, pretending to be like me. Now he's just a spoiled kid who only sees value in money and the status his mother flaunts. It felt like I hadn't just lost the company, I'd lost my own blood. When I finished the final line, the pen slipped from my fingers. I looked at the letter with watery eyes, feeling the full weight of what I'd done. This wasn't just quitting a job. It was the final cut, a small gesture on paper, but massive in meaning. That piece of paper marked the symbolic death of the businessman I used to be. I took a deep breath, folded it, and slipped it into an envelope. No name on the front, everyone already knew. I was done. That was my silent way of saying I wouldn't crawl anymore. I'd rather start from nothing than keep living as a shadow of myself. This old garage would be my starting point. Still, the emptiness gnawed at me. I knew she'd celebrate the news like another win. Probably toast with my son, laughing over my downfall. I could already picture the clink of their glasses. That image made my jaw clench. I couldn't erase the pain, but I could use it as fuel. I walked around the garage, brushing my hand across the abandoned cars, felt the dust, but also the promise beneath it. Each one whispered stories of speed and glory, like they were begging to be brought back. My heart beat faster. Maybe I could bring myself back too, just differently this time. The letter rested on the bench, marking the end of an era. But this garage, with its cracked walls and oil-stained floor, would become the birthplace of something new. I wasn't going to be remembered as the man who lost everything, but as the one who turned ashes into fuel for revenge. Outside, the noise of celebration was fading with the arrival of dawn. Inside, a new fire had been lit. I knew the road ahead would be rough, full of setbacks and humiliation. But for the first time in years, I felt something more powerful than pride or money. The fury of a man with nothing left to lose. The old garage seemed to breathe memories with every step I took. The oil-stained walls held echoes of old conversations, the laughter of employees, the constant roar of engines. Every corner brought back pieces of when this place pulsed with life and hope. I ran my hand across the bench, remembering the sleepless nights working alongside young apprentices. Now, there was only silence and dust. My memories dragged me back to the beginning. I saw my younger self again, eyes full of determination, drenched in sweat while piecing together makeshift repairs. Back then, hunger for success was stronger than any hardship. My wife had been a partner in those days. She'd bring me food, look after the kids, and smile at me like she believed in every bolt I tightened. Success didn't come quickly, but it came with consistency. Small repairs turned into major contracts, and before long, big companies were knocking on my door. I remembered that first big signature, the heart racing, the feeling that everything was finally paying off. The garage came alive that night. We celebrated with soda in plastic cups. As I walked among the abandoned cars, I imagined the sound of engines roaring back to life. Every echo in my head reminded me of who I once was. But the memories also hurt, because all of it had been ripped from my hands. What should have been a reminder of triumph had turned into a portrait of decay. Then the image of my son as a little boy came rushing back, covered in grease, laughing, trying to tighten bolts bigger than his hands. "One day this shop will be mine, Dad," he used to say, his eyes shining. I smiled bitterly, remembering that. Today, that prefers to pretend this place never existed, like it's a dead piece of history. I sat on a pile of worn-out tires and let myself sink into the past. My mind replayed the transformation of the shop into an empire, the luxury cars, the wealthy clients, the respected crew, and by my side, the smiling wife who once said she believed in me, but had already started laying the groundwork to take it all. The humiliation burned. How could I have been so blind? I, who could disassemble the most complex engines, didn't realize I was being dismantled, piece by piece, signing documents without reading, trusting a woman who claimed to be my partner. The master mechanic, able to understand any engine's growl, couldn't hear the silence of betrayal. The garage felt like it was mocking me. Leaks dripped into rusted buckets, as if even the roof had more integrity than my marriage. The dim light swung slightly, casting dancing shadows like ghosts of the past. The smell of rust and burnt oil mixed with the bitterness of the whiskey I still held in my hand. But in the middle of that pain, something shifted. If this place had once been the cradle of my rise, it could also be the setting for my return. The same garage that witnessed my beginning would now witness my rebirth. Not of the company, of me. I stood slowly, my knees creaking like old hinges. I walked to the workbench and grabbed a flashlight, shining it onto an old car covered in a dusty sheet. When I pulled the cover back, it revealed a forgotten but still imposing machine. My heart beat faster. Maybe this wasn't just a car. Maybe this was the sign I needed to start again. The memory of the trap she set came back like a punch. That sweet smile of hers, always so caring, so patient. Just sign here, love. It's for the kids' health plan. And I signed. I thought the love was still real. I thought we were still on the same side. The papers became routine. It's just for taxes, for retirement, to protect the family. I was always buried in work, too focused on engines and deadlines to stop and read. I trusted her, trusted blindly. I thought she was my partner. But she wasn't. She was something much worse, a silent enemy, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The day it all came out hit like a sledgehammer. A cold, bureaucratic meeting, and suddenly everything was in her name. The business I built with blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. Legally hers. I felt naked, powerless, like I'd dug my own grave with the same pen I used to build our future. I still grind my teeth remembering it. Me, a seasoned mechanic, outplayed by a carefully orchestrated show. Her smiles were poison. Her affection, just an act. She didn't just take the business. She took pride in reducing me to nothing. I walked around the garage, remembering the night I came home and saw the final stack of paperwork. Everything's settled now, she said, wearing that victory smirk, the smile of someone who knew she had won. I was too tired to fight. I just signed. My greatest defeat wasn't losing the company. It was trusting the wrong person. The pain wasn't just material. It was emotional, deep. That marriage, what I thought was a partnership, had been a calculated trap. And at the center of it all was my son, drifting even further away, seduced by the comfort she offered. I took a deep breath and looked again at the dusty old car. She may have taken my money, my company, my reputation. But she couldn't steal what mattered most. My hands, my mind, my love for machines. That part of me was untouchable. I picked up my tools and started taking the car apart. Every screw I loosened was a release. Every clang of metal a statement. My rage had turned into action, and my pain into momentum. I didn't need revenge through violence. This was my war. As I cleaned the rusted gears, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just trying to survive anymore. I wanted to prove, to myself and to the world, that I still had it. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be patient, methodical, and unstoppable. By the end of the night, the car was only partially dismantled. But I felt different. My face was covered in sweat and grease, but my eyes had a new fire. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The garage, once a graveyard of my past, was becoming the forge of my vengeance. The garage was drowned in silence, but inside me, a storm was brewing. I paced back and forth, replaying every detail of the betrayal. My ex-wife, with her calculated coldness, had turned love into a trap. My son, once my pride, now treated me like a burden. It all burned inside me like coals ready to ignite. The silence felt suffocating, but necessary. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to beg. The fury was intact, but contained. I sat on a bench, the resignation letter beside me, and stared at the cracked walls like they were enemies. My heart thudded heavy in my chest, each beat reminding me I had nothing left to lose. For most of my life, work had been my identity, and now, without a company, without a family, without even a name in the market, I felt like a discarded shell. But deep down, I knew I still had something. My skill. That thought was like a spark, a reminder that even broken, I still carried the talent that once made me great. I looked at the half-dismantled old car and gave a bitter smile. It wasn't just a machine. It was a metaphor. Just like that car, I had been abandoned, covered in dust, deemed useless. But I was a mechanic. I knew that any engine could roar again. I decided I would too. The rage I felt toward her turned into discipline. I worked in silence, every movement steady and deliberate. There was no rush, only focus. While the city slept, the sound of tools filled the garage. It was like composing a dark symphony made of metal, grease, and pain. In moments of rest, my mind went to my son. The image of him mocking my downfall hurt more than any financial loss. But the silence protected me. I wouldn't chase after him, wouldn't beg for his approval. My revenge would be so quiet, so absolute, that by the time they realized it, it would be too late. The garage, once a tomb, was now a battlefield. Every part removed, every gear cleaned, was a strike against humiliation. Sweat dripped, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I was fighting not just to survive, but to reclaim myself. Fury was my fuel. It kept me awake, even as my body begged for rest. Every time I thought of her smug smile, I tightened the bolts harder. Every time I remembered my son's scorn, I filed the metal with more force. I wasn't just rebuilding the car, I was rebuilding my soul. Outside silence clashed with the noise within. I didn't need to speak. My hands said everything. My tools were my voice. The steel was my reply. My revenge wouldn't come in words, but in results the world couldn't ignore. At sunrise, exhausted, I sat in front of the car and took a deep breath. It was far from finished, but it already looked different. Just like me, still broken, still rusted, but transforming. For the first time since the betrayal, I believed I could come back. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the cracks in the garage as I lit the blowtorch. The blue flame cut through the darkness, casting light on the old car. The heat and the crackle of metal gave me a strange sense of life. That tiny spark felt like a sign, a glimpse that something new was beginning. I worked all day, barely pausing, focused on reviving the machine. My calloused hands moved with the same precision they always had. The old tools still answered my grip, even if rusted. The clang of hammers and the smell of burned oil filled the air, restoring the atmosphere that had always given me purpose. In the afternoon, I came across a part that seemed beyond repair. The metal was worn, almost useless. But I didn't give up. I spent hours sanding, adjusting, testing improvised solutions. When it finally fit into place, I smiled for the first time in a long while. That part seemed to shout, "I can still work." As I worked, memories resurfaced. I remembered bringing back to life cars everyone else had written off. That skill had been my signature, what had earned me my reputation. And now I saw it clearly. I wasn't just restoring a car. I was restoring myself. She had taken the money, the contracts, even the respect of my son. But she could never take my talent. That truth was like fresh fuel for my heart. I had something no one could steal or fake. The gift of turning what was broken into something that ran like new. By nightfall, I started the engine for the first time. The weak roar echoed through the garage, breaking the heavy silence. Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but triumph. That first spark in the engine mirrored the one reigniting inside me. The noise drew the attention of a curious neighbor who peeked through the open door. He stepped inside, impressed I had dared touch a car so old. We chatted briefly, and he left amazed. For the first time, I felt someone might still see my worth. The engine's hum echoed like an anthem of rebirth. I knew the road ahead would be long and full of setbacks, but I no longer saw myself as defeated. The partially restored car stood as proof that I still had the strength to fight. That night, instead of whiskey, I toasted with a glass of water, a simple act, but loaded with meaning. I no longer wanted to numb the pain. I wanted to feel it and turn it into power. The fury was still there, but now it was focused. Before switching off the light, I looked at the car and whispered, "You and me, we'll show them." It was just the beginning, but the fire had been lit, and I knew no one could put it out. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the garage roof, lighting up floating specks of dust. I was on my knees in front of the old car, hands deep in grease. The thick smell clung to my skin, mixing with the sweat dripping down my face. Every part I salvaged seemed to return a piece of my soul I thought was lost. The work was hard, but freeing. As I cleaned the gears, memories of the early days came flooding back. Back then, there were no fancy machines or big contracts, just hunger, passion, and the will to win. And now I found myself in the same place, almost as if I had traveled back in time. Except this time, there was no wife beside me. I was alone, and strangely, freer than ever. With each click of metal fitting into place, with every flash of the torch, I felt a quiet sense of rebirth. The clanking of tools filled the space, driving out the ghosts of the past. I realized then, the grease everyone else saw as filth was actually the mark of who I was. By late afternoon, worn out, I stepped back to look at what I had done. The car was still far from finished, but it was starting to shine. Light bounced off the clean metal, revealing a beauty that had been hidden. I smiled, not because of the car, but because I knew what it symbolized. I was coming back. The challenges, though, were many. My tools were old, some broken. Parts were hard to find. I'd have to improvise, build solutions from scratch, just like in the old days. But that didn't scare me. If anything, it brought back the thrill I had lost in the luxury of the big business I'd built. Slowly, curious customers began to show up. At first, just neighbors bringing in simple cars. Then, old acquaintances who still remembered my reputation. What once looked like a junkyard now had voices, quiet laughter, and the weight of growing respect. Dignity was beginning to rise from the dust. I felt alive again. I hadn't felt that in years. This sense of control, of usefulness. Each car I fixed was a small restoration of my own self. The revenge was shifting, no longer just about destroying what she stole, but about rebuilding what I had lost. I wanted to prove, silently and consistently, that I was still the best. That night, wiping grease from my hands, I glanced at the resignation letter still sitting on the bench. No regrets. That paper had marked the turning point in my life. It was as if I had burned the bridge to my old self, and now there was no way but forward. I was exhausted, but sleep came easy. I lay down on the makeshift mattress in the corner of the garage, listening to the metal ticking as it cooled. My heart beat steady, almost in rhythm with the machines. For the first time in a long while, I fell asleep, with hope. As the silence of the night settled over the garage, I dreamed of a future where my workshop was respected once again. Deep down, I knew this rebirth would also be the path to revenge, and that thought made me smile, even in the dark. The next morning, the sound of my hammer echoed through the garage when a car pulled up out front. A middle-aged man stepped out, curious, drawn in by the noise. He peeked inside and saw me, knee-deep in the restoration of the old car, like I was bringing something forgotten back to life. He approached slowly, hesitant, but intrigued. "You still working on these relics?" he asked, half skeptical, half impressed. I looked up, face dripping with sweat and smeared with grease, and replied, "I never stopped. I just needed time to remember who I was." He smiled, caught off guard by the confidence in my voice. He told me he had an old car that had been sitting untouched for years. No one had been able to fix it. But after seeing the work I was doing here, he thought, just maybe, I was the right guy. I listened quietly, weighing the job. Inside, my heart was racing. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. I didn't promise miracles. I never do. But I accepted the challenge. He seemed satisfied just by the determination in my eyes. If you can make that car run again, I'll pay whatever it takes, he said, handing me the keys. The weight of that metal in my hand felt like a trophy, proof that my return had truly begun. In the days that followed, the garage filled with sound again. Tools scraped, engines coughed, sparks lit the air. I worked non-stop, focused entirely on the new project. Every bit of progress reminded me I was getting closer to proving, mostly to myself, that I wasn't done yet. The car was tough, but so was I. Word started to spread around town. The old mechanic is back, some said. He's working on cars no one else dares touch, others whispered. My name, erased by my ex-wife, was coming back. Little ripples of respect reached my ears and kept my fire burning. The client returned a few days later to check on the project, and was blown away. The engine, once dead, now rumbled softly. I don't believe it. You brought it back to life, he said, stunned. I nodded, keeping my expression calm. But inside, my heart was roaring. The news spread fast. More collectors grew curious, wanting to see if the rumors were true. The garage, once a place for rusted junk, was becoming a gathering spot for lovers of classic machines. Life was returning to the space I'd once written off as a graveyard. I knew this was just the start. Every restored car was another step up, and every client I won over was one less for her. Piece by piece, I was reclaiming what she thought she had stolen forever. That night, I stood in front of the restored car, staring at its polished body under the soft garage light. I ran my hand along the cold metal and smiled. The first spark had become a flame, and now, nothing could stop the return of my craft, not even the ghosts of the past. Word of my reborn garage didn't take long to reach my ex-wife's ears. At first, she laughed, assuming it was just another desperate attempt by a man who had already lost. But as former clients began praising my flawless work, the laughter faded. For the first time, she felt her newly stolen empire was at risk. Sitting in her luxurious office, crystal glasses on the table, she listened to whispers from businessmen considering bringing their cars to my old garage. It's just cheap nostalgia, she told herself, trying to quiet the tightening in her chest. But deep down, she knew. My talent wasn't something she could buy, and that scared her. She started interrogating her most loyal employees. She wanted names, details, a list of clients who had disappeared without explanation. Her calculating mind kicked into gear. Her cold stare returned. If I was trying to rise again, she'd make sure to crush me once more. Meanwhile, I worked in silence, unaware that my garage had already become a target. I focused on the new car, pouring every ounce of myself into the metal. With every new sound from the revived engine, the garage felt more alive. There was no time for distractions. My revenge was only beginning, and I had no idea I'd already sparked her wrath. She used our son first, sent him as a messenger. At dinner, she mocked the garage with that familiar disgust, encouraging him to laugh at me. He played along, calling the place a joke, mocking the idea that it could ever threaten her empire. To him, I was nothing but a stubborn shadow refusing to disappear. But she knew the truth. That shine in the client's eyes, the same one she saw decades ago when she still believed in my skill, had returned, and that glow was dangerous. In her mind, threats had to be eliminated. She started planning, quietly. She knew exactly how to hurt me, through the garage. All it would take was a single mistake, a small act of sabotage, and the world would laugh at me again. Her frozen smile returned. The silent war had begun. Back at the garage, I felt only exhaustion in my hands and satisfaction in my progress. The engine's growls drowned out every bitter memory. I didn't see the shadows creeping in. I didn't feel the traps being laid. My mind was locked on the work, not the betrayal behind the curtain. Still, something felt off. I was used to listening, not just to people, but to machines. I noticed a bolt out of place, a tool missing. Minor things. But my gut told me someone was meddling. That night, locking the big metal door, a chill ran down my spine. I looked back, and could have sworn a shadow moved among the abandoned cars. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I didn't know it yet, but she had declared war, and my garage was the battlefield. I didn't expect to see him so soon. A few days later, he showed up, unannounced. He parked his imported car in front of the garage and stepped out like he was entering a war zone. Expensive clothes, spotless sneakers, strong cologne. He was the picture of empty luxury. And me, covered in grease, sweating, with a face marked by work. The contrast was cruel, but real. He looked around with contempt, like the place was just a stage for failure. "So, this is where you chose to die?" he said, wearing that arrogant smile he inherited from his mother. I didn't respond. I grabbed a rag and slowly wiped my hands. Then I looked him in the eye. There was no pleading in my gaze anymore, just resolve. I knew that any wrong word would be used as ammo. Like so many times before, I chose silence. He laughed, uncomfortable, but trying to look superior. "Aren't you tired of embarrassing yourself? While the company grows, you play with junk." The words hit like stones, but they didn't knock me off balance. Inside, the anger boiled, but I know it too well. I've learned how to channel it. I wasn't seeking his approval anymore, not now. My goal was bigger, to prove that I'm still the best, with or without applause. He walked through the garage, pointing mockingly at the mattress in the corner, the old tools, the unfinished car. Every comment was an attempt to belittle me. But the more he spoke, the more I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't laughing just out of disdain. He laughed because, deep down, he knew I could rise again. Then I spoke, calm, cold. "One day you'll understand the value of what truly matters. But when that day comes, it might be too late." He went quiet for a moment. But soon, he laughed again, forcing the same arrogance. "You're never getting back up, old man." He left that poison in the air and walked out. His car's roar tore through the street, loud and defiant, as if trying to drown out the timid growl of the engine inside my garage. I stood there, fists clenched, eyes fixed on the closed door. The pain was real, but even more real was the determination rising inside me. He's no longer my support. If he ever was, today he's just another reflection of the lie that surrounded me. He's lost in his mother's shadow, drunk on luxury. The pain eats at me, but the pain also fuels my strength. Every word he spoke becomes energy. That night, I worked like there was no tomorrow. The sound of tools echoed loud, drowning out everything he'd said. Every hammer strike was an answer, every adjustment, a statement. I don't need a stage. I don't need applause. I just need to do what I do, better than anyone else. The garage was breathing. The old car was coming to life, and new clients kept arriving. Respect was returning. Not in a rush, but steady and firm. And I knew, when I triumphed, he'd be forced to see it. I turned off the lights, stood still in silence. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It was a silence full of promises, of a quiet fury forged in steel. He mocked me today, but soon, he'll watch the fire of my return burning right before his eyes. Weeks passed, and my garage was no longer the same. The constant sound of restored engines echoed through the streets, drawing the attention of curious passers-by and vintage car lovers. Wealthy collectors, some from far away, started knocking at my door in search of my touch. The forgotten workshop came back to life, and the fame spread like wildfire. Local newspapers began writing about the rebirth of the master of machines. Photos of the garage appeared, calling me the guardian of classics. With each published article came more clients, more challenges. And even though I was tired, I felt stronger. That garage wasn't just a job. It was my silent revenge taking shape. The neighbors who once saw me as a failure now greeted me with respect. Kids crowded at the door, wanting to hear the roar of the engines. Some asked to see the restored cars up close. The garage, once lifeless, became a symbol of rebirth. And I knew. She was hearing about it too. That satisfied me, in silence. Even with all the praise, I stayed focused. I wasn't chasing applause or spotlights, only results. Every flawless car I delivered was an invisible stab at her pride. Clients who once fed the empire she stole were now returning. Not for luxury, for the truth of my craft. My son began hearing the talk. People from high society speaking of the old mechanic. Some of his rich friends began admiring my skill, the same skill he had ignored. It bothered him. He tried to laugh it off, make jokes, but the discomfort was there. He was starting to realize that even without money, I was reclaiming something bigger: respect. Meanwhile, the garage received unexpected visitors. Former clients of the company showed up quietly, asking me to restore their cars, away from her eyes. I accepted. No words needed. I knew that, in time, every client I gained was a direct blow to the stolen empire. Even exhausted, I worked with joy. The sweat poured, the grease stuck to my skin, and my heart beat strong. It wasn't just about money. It was knowing I was writing a new story. Every engine that roared again was a page of my revenge. My workshop became a meeting point. Vintage car lovers came to talk, swap stories, admire my work. There, I wasn't the defeated man. I was the master I had always been. That atmosphere fed my soul. Still wounded, but standing. Still, I stayed silent. I didn't seek confrontation. I gave no interviews, made no statements against her. My revenge was different. To destroy what she built using nothing but my art. Silent success is the deadliest poison there is, and I was serving it, one drop at a time. At night, lying on the cot, I'd close my eyes and imagine her face as she realized she was losing clients, the cold smile beginning to crack. That image gave me peace, and more than that, it reminded me that this was just the beginning. My growing success didn't go unnoticed, and she, furious over the loss of clients, decided to act. She used her connections to send someone my way, a former employee pretending to look for work. I welcomed the guy with suspicion, but ended up letting him in. Maybe for a moment I wanted to believe he was just another soul looking for redemption. I had no idea the shadow of sabotage had just stepped into my workshop. The signs were subtle at first. A bolt left loose. A missing part. A broken tool with no explanation. I, who had learned to spot every detail in an engine, knew this wasn't coincidence. Someone was trying to sabotage my comeback. The anger came fast and hard, but I took a breath. I didn't throw him out. I chose to observe. I kept working in silence, as always, but with eyes sharp on every move. The workshop, which symbolized my rebirth, now also became a field of surveillance. One night I found a damaged car. The engine I had adjusted to perfection was compromised. If the client had picked it up before I noticed, my name would have been on the line. My heart raced, but I managed to fix it in time. And right then, I knew for sure, there was a saboteur among us. I started testing him. I left parts intentionally misaligned, tools out of place. I watched every reaction, and soon I confirmed what I already suspected. He wasn't there to help. He was there to ruin me. Her image came to mind immediately. This had her fingerprints all over it. Cold, calculated, poisonous. She was never content with winning. She had to crush me every time I tried to rise. I clenched my fists and made a promise to myself. Not this time. But I was smart. I didn't confront him right away. I let him think he was winning. Meanwhile, I reinforced every part, double-checked every step. Nothing would leave the shop with flaws. My garage had become a battleground of silence, and every screw was a strategic move. The fear of losing my reputation was real, but it also kept me sharper than ever. I knew she wanted to see me fail, publicly, but I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. After a week, when he thought he'd done enough damage, I called him to the corner of the garage. I looked him straight in the eye without raising my voice. I know what you're doing, and it won't work. I didn't have to say anything else. My eyes said it all. He left that night, didn't look back. Alone in the garage, I took a deep breath. The immediate threat was gone. But I knew This was only the beginning. She wouldn't give up so easily. But now, neither would I. If in the past she brought me down with paper, now she'd have to face something much more dangerous. The fury of a man reborn. The invitation arrived in an elegant envelope, sealed with a golden crest. It was for one of the biggest classic car auctions in the region. A powerful collector wanted me to restore a rare vehicle to be showcased there. My heart raced. It was the perfect chance to show my talent and strike her right where it hurt. I knew the event would attract the same businessmen who, for years, had sustained the empire she ripped from me. They would all be there, including her. The possibility of facing her, not with words but with flawless work, filled me with energy. For the first time in a long while, I felt I had a real shot at redemption. The car that arrived at the shop was a collector's classic, but in terrible shape. The engine was dead, the body corroded, and the parts scarce. An almost impossible challenge. But where others saw scrap, I saw potential. Where there was ruin, I saw a chance to win. What followed were days of exhaustion and discipline. I pulled all-nighters in the shop, sweating over that car, testing improvised solutions. Every bit of progress cost me hours without sleep. But I didn't complain. Every drop of sweat reminded me that revenge demands sacrifice. As I worked, I heard the rumors. She would be at the auction too, with her team and her luxury cars. That only sharpened my focus. I didn't want to compete. I wanted to beat her, not with legal battles, with iron, grease, and skill. When my son found out about the invitation, he laughed in my face. "You think you can compete with me and Mom? This'll be your biggest failure yet." I didn't answer, just looked at the car and went back to work. Silence was my reply, but inside, the anger grew. Every mockery from him was another nail in the coffin of what we once had. Time flew. The day of the auction was getting closer, and the car still wasn't ready, but I never thought about giving up. Every night, when my muscles were screaming, I pictured her cold smile. That's what pushed me to tighten one more bolt, sand one more panel. I wasn't just fixing a car, I was rebuilding myself. The shop became a war zone. The sound of tools echoed through the night. That car was my weapon. At the auction, every restored detail would be a direct blow to the image she had built. The neighbors noticed my absence. I barely spoke, barely ate. All of me was focused on that car, and somehow, that obsession inspired others. A few friends offered help, but I declined. This battle was mine. Personal, non-transferable. On the eve of the event, the car was starting to breathe. The engine roared with power. The body gleamed under the workshop light. There was still work to do, but I believed. I was ready to show the world that a man once defeated can rise from the ashes. In the early hours before the auction, I entered the shop and felt something was off. Tools were out of place. The air was heavy. When I approached the car, my heart nearly stopped. The engine had been sabotaged. Cut hoses, loosened parts, oil spilled across the floor. Her final blow had landed. For a few minutes, I stood still. Despair swallowed me whole. Weeks of work. It all seemed lost. I dropped to my knees, hands covered in oil, feeling the weight of defeat crush me again. I saw her image, laughing, celebrating my downfall. And for a moment, I nearly let the pain win. But then, from within that pain, came a memory. I saw a younger version of myself, fixing cars with old tools and improvised parts. I saw the hunger to succeed, the talent that had never left me. And there, on my knees, I did what I've always done. I got up. My hands went back to work, undoing the damage. Each part restored was a response to betrayal. Each repair, a silent way of saying she wouldn't break me that easily. Once more, the shop became a battlefield. The hours flew, my body cried for rest, my eyes burned. But I didn't stop. I knew I had to finish by sunrise, or I'd lose everything. The risk was enormous. But the sacrifice was necessary. This was my chance, and I wouldn't waste it. With every bolt I fastened, I heard my son's voice in my head. "You'll never get back up, old man." And there, with fists covered in grease, I answered in silence. I was getting up. And this time, No one would stop me. At the peak of the night, my body gave out for a moment. I sat on the floor, sweating, exhausted, trying to find strength. The silence around me seemed to mock me. But when I looked at the car, I saw more than a machine. I saw my whole life in it. And I knew I couldn't quit. I went back to work, now with tears in my eyes. The pain, the loneliness, the rage. It all poured into my movements. This was more than a repair. It was resistance. The shop vibrated with me, as if the old walls were pushing me forward. And when the first ray of sunlight pierced the broken window, I turned the key. The engine roared. The sound filled the shop, a roar of victory. I collapsed into a seat, drained, but smiling. Against all odds, I had survived the darkest night of my life. I looked at the car, gleaming, flawless, breathing like new. But it was more than that. It was my story, restored. And me, I was no longer the broken man she left behind. I was the man who, from the ashes, lit the fire of vengeance. The auction hall shimmered under golden chandeliers, reflecting off the polished surfaces of luxury cars on display. Businessmen, collectors, and onlookers crowded in to admire the rare machines parading under the lights. At the center, she smiled her calculated smile, surrounded by wealthy clients and my son, proud of his mother. I entered quietly, dressed in simple clothes, drawing little attention. But in my eyes was the weight of a war on the verge of being won. I felt the stares the moment I walked in. Some whispered, remembering my glorious past and humiliating fall. Others laughed, thinking my presence there was a last, desperate attempt. She saw me and offered that familiar look of contempt. "Came to watch me win?" she whispered as our eyes met. I said nothing. I walked straight to the car I had rebuilt with my own hands. When the cover came off, a murmur rippled through the room. The car gleamed like it had just been born. Every detail shone under the lights. Every line of the bodywork looked sculpted. People leaned in, admiring it, touching it carefully, almost reverently. Even the harshest critics were silent in the face of perfection. I caught sight of my son, standing beside her, stunned. "It can't be. He didn't do this alone." She tried to stay composed, but her eyes gave her away. My car didn't just match hers. It surpassed them. For the first time in a long while, her cold smile cracked. The blow had landed. The auctioneer began the bidding, and the competition quickly heated up. The car's value climbed fast, overtaking every other vehicle presented by her company. Each new bid was a dagger to her vanity, a reminder that the man she tried to erase still stood unmatched. Applause broke out across the hall, and the crowd hailed me as a master. At the peak of the bidding, a renowned collector took the car for a fortune. The roar of applause echoed through the room, and every eye turned to me. I didn't celebrate. I didn't raise my hands. I just looked at her. Her face was a mix of fury and fear, as if she finally realized the control she clung to was slipping. My son lowered his gaze, ashamed. Maybe he remembered the times he mocked me, the cruel words he'd thrown at me in the garage. And now, in front of everyone, he saw me win. He wanted to come over. I could see it, but he didn't. I didn't even look at him. The time for apologies had passed. When the ceremony ended, I walked out slowly. People were still talking about the victory, but I didn't care for the applause. I had already won. My revenge wasn't in the money I made. It was in the shattered look on her face, and in my son's regretful silence. Outside, in the parking lot, I took a deep breath. The cool night air carried a faint scent of burning coal, just like that Labor Day when everything had started. I smiled, knowing that, just like the cars I restore, I had risen from the ashes. The garage that was once my grave had become the monument to my victory. I no longer needed the stolen company or the family that turned its back on me. The respect I'd regained, no one could ever take that away. As I walked under the dim light of the street lamps, I whispered to myself, from the ashes, I rose. And just like that, in silence, I walked toward the future I had rebuilt with my own two hands.